Barač objašnjavao da je to nešto što on kad pritisne nas nema. Vjerujte da sam ja molio Boga da ga nekad pritisne. Gledala su nas kao životinje, tako da sam se ja možda u jednom trenutku počeo i osjećati tako. Znate, kad neko dođe i gledate od ozgo sa visine, ti ovako preplašen, zuriš u njega. Ja sam takav osjećaj da nikad više neću raditi. Nikad više neću raditi neke stvari koje sam volio.
Good afternoon and welcome, and I guess the sound is fine. My name is Tony Borden, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for War and Peace Reporting, based in London. IWPR is an international NGO that strengthens the voices of local journalists and civic activists in areas of crisis and conflict around the world. By giving voice, we help resolve conflict and contribute to positive change. Now, I could just try to promote the organization and tell you how great we are, and that's what charity directors usually do. But I was asked today to try to tell a more personal story about my involvement with IWPR as the founder, and to share some experiences over more than 20 years. I guess that means, why did I do it? What are some of the highlights? And what have I learned? I began my career in publishing and editing in New York City. They were wonderful years, and it was terrific fun. But you know, I wondered, what did it all mean? By the time IWPR came around, I was in London, and frankly, a little bit at loose ends. It's a condition in the journalism trade we also call working freelance. So that's the practical side. But I like to think that the real reason I became involved, and the reason I've stayed involved, is hope. Back in the early 1990s, at a time of monolithic mainstream media, before the technology revolution and globalization, we had a sense, we had an instinct that there were unheard voices out there, and that what they had to say really mattered. We wanted to make a difference, and we thought we could do that by trying to help these voices from conflict zones to be heard. The first project was a small newsletter published by a group of us in London around the first Gulf War, highlighting the voices of Iraqis, Kurds, and others from around the Middle East. We moved on to what was really the foundation period of the Institute in the Balkans, working very intensively for more than a decade, well more than a decade, across the region. As Yugoslavia tore itself apart, chauvinist propaganda and vicious diatribes against others fueled hatred and drove bloodshed. The nationalist media became an instrument of war. We saw our role as highlighting different voices, responsible and independent journalists, constructive and democratic civic activists. We published a magazine which grew thicker and thicker. After the Bosnian peace agreement, we opened up field offices and began training projects on the ground. As the conflict in Kosovo picked up speed through the voice of a remarkable journalist, Jerahina Tuhina, we went online and we published what may be the first wartime blog ever produced. We started to cover the International Criminal Tribunal in The Hague, which is one reason why it's such a great pleasure to be in this palace and in this wonderful city of peace and justice, work that we still continue. And we founded a network of local media and training hubs across the region, which still continue. We had been working for 4 years already by the time of the genocide in Srebrenica. Men separated from women, taken to the woods and slaughtered by their thousands. We did not feel at that time, on that day, that we had a solution for how media could help stop war and make peace. It was certainly a time of great self-doubt. Fortunately, a peace activist of many years reminded me of the concept, think global and act local. Even if high politics failed so spectacularly, even if rampant soldiers could not be stopped, our job is to work at the grassroots, to seed long-term change and keep hope alive. It was a lesson that I would have to remind myself of many times over the years. A decade on, the circle was closed. I was traveling to the airport in Skopje, Macedonia, when I heard that a second plane had crashed into the Twin Towers in my cherished birth city of New York. My father had worked in those buildings only a few years before, and I knew them well. Suddenly, our efforts, which had just been about there, were now about back home as well. Extremist ideals, violent propaganda, hate speech. What we had seen with such dramatic regional effect in the Balkans had now gone global. It was inevitable that so would we. We expanded to Afghanistan and Iraq, and then Africa, and across Middle East and North Africa, and now Asia and Latin America. Each country is different. Each project you undertake has to respond to needs, gaps, and available resources. So the diversity of our programming is very wide, providing intensive training and mentoring, supporting professional media production on human rights, reconciliation, and women's issues, providing strategic planning and advice and communications training to local civil society groups. An increasing part of our work today is supporting the safety and security of local journalists and civil society activists whose frontline efforts or online presence are putting them at increasing risk from hostile authorities. Setbacks continue. Governments don't reform, dictatorships dig in, frozen conflicts flare up. The overheated euphoria of the Arab Spring, driven so much by the media and mobile communications, has turned ice cold. Above all, to see Syrian refugees in their thousands trudging across the same Balkan lands, which only so recently had their own populations on the move, breaks our hearts. In the Balkans, we undertook field programming, and it continued. I'm sorry. I should do this online. Then it would be okay. But I was overtaken by the issues, and I know why. I tried to remember the words of my old peace activist friend, and we trudge on. And now I know why, because only a few months ago, an ISIS car bomb in Baghdad killed Ammar al-Shabandar, one of my dearest friends, and the long-standing head of our major Iraq programming. Ammar's vision for a positive future in his country was inextinguishable. His strategy for building peace and reducing conflict through reconciliation among communities through the media was clear and effective. And his life-sacrificing commitment to the cause was, well, complete. Ammar was an idealist and a rascal, and I will always miss him. But we have highlights and examples of hope as well, launching the first independent news agency in Afghanistan, supporting the passage of major media reform legislation in Rwanda, supporting launching a major breakthrough human rights TV magazine program in Iraq, programming around women and youth and elections in fragile post-conflict environments, courageous reporting from forgotten worlds like Uzbekistan or northern Uganda. Some years ago, a precocious young girl living in the Swat Valley amid Taliban conflict joined IWPR's youth training and civic education program. Precocious, high-spirited, but remarkably thoughtful for her age, she became a peer educator in our program, started to blog for the BBC, and the rest truly is history. She suffered an assassination attempt. She survived and moved to the UK. Late last year, Malala Yousafzai, a former IWPR trainee, became the youngest person ever to receive the Nobel Prize for Peace. Amid all this, I am torn between such despair and such optimism. The extent of the challenges we face, the entrenched conflicts, and above all, the spread of extremist ideologies, violent and extremist ideologies, is incredibly dispiriting. Yet the potential for citizen engagement, the power of local voices, and the increasing recognition of these factors internationally helps sustain us. So, what are my lessons? Let me choose three. First of all, there are no quick fixes. The solutions are long-term. Our Western habit of moving on too quickly is reckless. It is imperative to identify long-term partnerships and sustain the course. Second, technology is value neutral. It can be a force, as we just saw, for a great good, and has enormous potential. IWPR is one such example. But it can also be used for great evil. ISIS is winning the information war, and we face a long generational struggle ahead. But third, and above all, the real solution is people. The desire I saw in Sarajevo 2 decades ago to communicate honestly and freely is exactly the same as I saw in Baghdad just a couple of weeks ago. IWPR's award-winning project coordinator in Syria, Zeina Ehram, has spent the last 2 years living just exactly at the front line in Aleppo. She's a young woman of amazing talent, composure, and staggering courage. Individuals like these are what IWPR is all about. It is our aim to work for the long term, to support peace and positive change from the ground up through such forthright voices as these. They motivate us every day to get up and do everything that we can to help them. And after many, many years, they still continue to give me hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.